On a quiet Florida morning in 1984, a migrant farm worker stepped into the sugarcane fields with a rifle. Minutes later, one man was dead, another was barely alive, and the killer, Juan Dios Garza, didn't run into the town, didn't steal a car, didn't leave a single footprint in the mud. He simply vanished. No tracks. No witnesses. No trail. And when police tried to retrace his steps, they discovered something far more disturbing. The crime scene didn't match the witness reports. The timeline didn't match the coroner's findings. And the evidence that should have solved the case didn't exist. Within days, Garza's name was placed on an FBI wanted list. But for the next 40 years, leads were lost, files were redacted, and sightings were quietly ignored. Some say he fled the country. Others believe he never left Belle Glade at all. But there is one photo taken in 1985 that could reveal exactly what happened to him. A photo that has never been released to the public, and one the FBI refuses to acknowledge even exists. This is the story of a murder that should have been solved in a single morning, and instead exposed a system that let a killer disappear into thin air, either through failure or by design. When investigators tried to piece together who Juan Dios Garza really was, they found a man who almost didn't exist on paper. Born in Mexico on September 13, 1953, Garza spent most of his adult life drifting between migrant camps across the American South. Belle Glade, Florida, with its endless sugarcane rows and low-wage labor, was the kind of place where a man could work for years and leave behind almost nothing but a first name. But Garza didn't just blend in. He hid. He used several identities. Juan Sauceda Garza, Juan de Dios Garza, Juan Dios Garza Sauceda. Different combinations. Different signatures. Different stories depending on who was asking. Co-workers said he kept to himself, a thin, quiet man who rarely smiled. The kind of person who would eat alone, sleep alone, and walk home long after everyone else had disappeared into the barracks. But on the morning of October 21, 1984, something in him had changed. Just after sunrise, Garza wasn't heading to the fields with the other workers. He wasn't clocking in. He wasn't carrying tools. He was carrying a rifle, and he was walking with a purpose. Witnesses later said they saw him move across the dew-soaked cane rows toward the canal, not wandering, not stumbling, following a straight line toward one specific man. Minutes later, a single gunshot cracked across the fields, a sound so normal in Belle Glade that at first, no one looked up. But when someone finally went to check, the scene was worse than anyone expected. One man was dead. Another, his brother, was shot and bleeding beside him. Barely conscious, barely breathing, and before he passed out, he gave investigators the only clear lead they ever had. Juan shot us. For detectives, this should have been the beginning of the chase. Instead, it was the first sign that nothing about this case would make sense. Because when deputies arrived, Juan Dios Garza wasn't hiding behind a tree. He wasn't running down the dirt road. He wasn't swimming the canal. He was gone, completely. Unexplainably. No boot prints leading away. No disturbed reeds. No weapon dropped in panic. The rifle they found had been wiped clean. Every surface, every trace, every fingerprint. In the middle of an open field, at sunrise with nowhere to hide, a man had executed a killing, and then vanished, as if he'd never been there at all. Detectives ordered roadblocks. Helicopters swept the cane lines. Dogs were brought in, but the dogs had nothing to track. Not a scent, not a trail, not a direction. One officer later wrote in his report, "It was like he evaporated." But the truth is more unsettling. From the moment the shots were fired, the timeline of this crime was already starting to break apart, and everything investigators thought they knew about what happened that morning was wrong. The first sign that something was wrong with this case wasn't the disappearance. It was the silence. Because after the initial manhunt ended with nothing but trampled grass and unanswered questions, the investigation didn't expand. It collapsed. Within days, the report slowed. Within a week, the tone shifted. And within 1 month, it was as if the case was already being pushed into the shadows. But the deeper investigators dug, the more the timeline began to fall apart. The shooting was officially logged as happening at 6:47 a.m. Clean, precise, something investigators could build around. But dispatch records, uncovered later through legal pressure, showed the first emergency call didn't come in until 7:15 a.m. A 28-minute gap between the supposed moment of murder and the moment anyone bothered to call for help. 28 minutes is enough time to run. Enough time to hide, but it's also enough time to stage something. And that wasn't the only fracture. One eyewitness originally reported seeing, quote, 2 men arguing near the canal around 6:30, But in later affidavits, that same witness changed the time to just before 7. When asked why, they admitted something investigators never expected to hear. "I was told to revise it because my time didn't match the coroner's report." Who told them? Why did the time need to change? What were investigators trying to align or hide? No one has ever given a clear answer. And then there were the shell casings. Police recovered several near the canal bank, but their distribution told a different story. A shooter who moved, repositioned, fired again. The problem? The surviving brother said the shooting happened during an argument. A single confrontation. A single shot. The casings suggested movement. His story did not. Even more troubling, the body wasn't found exactly where he said it should have fallen. Something was off. Something big. When investigators tried to reconstruct the scene a week later, they discovered another impossibility. The direction Garza was said to have fled, the path indicated by the surviving brother, led directly into the canal itself. But the muddy edges showed no splash, no drag marks, no footprints entering or exiting. It was like someone mapped out a route that physically couldn't have happened. And then came the biggest discrepancy of all. The only piece of physical evidence left behind, the rifle, had been completely wiped clean. Not partially, not carelessly, perfectly. Wiped clean by a migrant laborer on the run? At sunrise? In open view? With no transportation and no time? Highly unlikely. Investigators began to consider the unthinkable. Either the surviving witness got the details wrong, or someone altered the scene before police ever arrived. But if that was true, who did it? And why? The timeline was breaking. The evidence was breaking, and the official version of events was no longer holding together. But what came next? The family's battle for answers would reveal just how deep the cracks in this case truly went. For most families, when a loved one is accused of murder and then vanishes, the police come to them with questions. A knock at the door, a formal interview, a case officer assigned to keep them informed. But for the Garza family, none of that happened. They learned the truth the way strangers do, through whispers, rumors, and eventually online searches. When Juan's mother, Carmen, first heard her son's name connected to a murder, the information was scattered, cold, and already weeks old. No explanation, no report, no contact from American authorities. She called the police in Belle Glade. No answer. She called again. Nothing. For a grieving mother, it felt impossible. "How can someone disappear after murder?" she asked in a rare interview. "How do you lose a man like that? We didn't even know he was a suspect until we found his name on the internet." Grief turned into suspicion. Suspicion turned into obsession. The family began their own investigation. With no help, no funding, and no access to the documents, law enforcement kept hidden behind ongoing investigation excuses. They mailed handwritten letters to Florida police departments. They called every number printed on public wanted posters. Carmen's daughter traveled from church to church, asking if anyone had seen Juan. His cousin Daniela drove across the Texas border, taping flyers on gas station doors, laundromats, mechanic shops, anywhere a migrant worker might pass through. Still, no one gave them real answers. Law enforcement repeated the same phrase: "We can't comment on an open case." But if the case was open, why did every door feel closed? The family pushed harder. They contacted the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office directly. Voicemails went unanswered. Certified letters disappeared somewhere in the bureaucracy. Finally, a public information officer responded. His answer was short. "The details are sealed." Sealed from who? From the family of the suspect? Or from the public who might uncover something investigators didn't want seen? Shut out of official channels, the family turned to the only weapon they had left. The public. Juan's younger brother created a Facebook page called Justice for Dios. Every week, he posted missing flyers in English and Spanish. He shared news clippings. He begged for tips. At first, the posts went unnoticed. Then one day they didn't. Spanish-language news outlets picked up the story. Univision reported on it. Then Telemundo. Suddenly, people were talking, sharing, commenting, and that's when an email arrived. Late at night. No subject line. No greeting. No signature. Just one sentence. He was seen crossing into Reynosa in '85 under a different name. No phone number. No way to trace the sender. No confirmation. But that single message changed everything. Because the date fit. The location fit. And the family had long suspected that if Juan survived, he would have headed toward the border. To Reynosa. across from McAllen, Texas, a corridor known for migrants, runaways, and fugitives. The Garzas turned the tip over to federal authorities, begging them to reopen the investigation, to follow any thread, any lead. But federal authorities never replied. Instead, the tip only opened more questions. Was Juan really seen alive in 1985? Or was someone else using his name? Was this a clue? Or a warning? A truth? Or a distraction? And what the tipster hinted, what came next, would throw the entire case into chaos. Because this wasn't just a disappearing suspect. It was the beginning of a pattern of missing files, conflicting times, and evidence that didn't match any known version of the truth. And the family was about to discover just how deep that pattern went. When the anonymous email about Reynosa arrived, the Garza family believed, just for a moment, that they finally had momentum. But what they received next wasn't cooperation. It was redaction. When they filed Freedom of Information Act requests, hoping to retrieve the most basic details of the case, official reports, timelines, evidence logs, they instead received a thick envelope of documents so heavily blacked out that entire pages were nothing but ink. Names, blacked out. Locations, blacked out. Descriptions of evidence, blacked out. Even the timestamp on one of the crime scene photos was blurred beyond recognition. But buried inside that mess of ink was something worse than missing information. Contradicting information, because according to the newly obtained documents, the official shooting time changed. The dispatch logs didn't match the officer's statements, and the coroner's timeline conflicted with both of them. It wasn't just sloppy record-keeping. It was impossible record-keeping. The more the family read, the clearer it became. There wasn't one timeline of the murder. There were three. Three versions, three contradictions, three different attempts to shape what happened. Then came the crime scene photographs. The family requested all images taken that morning. What they received was only one, a blurred Polaroid labeled Exhibit B. The photo showed a body near the canal, exactly what the public file described. But when the family compared it to an image later released in FBI bulletins, the backgrounds didn't match. In the public FBI photo, the canal bank was barren. In Exhibit B, there were tire tracks and debris. Same victim, same location, same morning. Two different landscapes. Which one was real? Which one was filed? And which one was quietly replaced? The family pushed further. Through legal assistance, they obtained archived paperwork from a court clerk's office, documents that should have been in the sheriff's file all along. But those documents revealed another disturbing detail. The original autopsy report listed 3 crime scene photos, but only one was ever provided. The other 2 had no digital record, no printed record, and no explanation for why they could not be located. Evidence doesn't just disappear. It is misplaced, misfiled, or hidden. Which one applied here? The deeper they dug, the stranger it got. Because a week after the murder, when detectives returned to the scene for a secondary analysis, they noted something that was never mentioned publicly. The blood traces found in the soil did not match the spot where the body was recorded, meaning the victim didn't fall where the public crime scene suggests, meaning the scene may have been moved, staged, or altered before police ever photographed it. Even officers at the time admitted quietly. Something wasn't right about that morning. Evidence went missing. Timelines changed. Witnesses were encouraged to adjust their statements. And yet, no one in law enforcement seemed interested in reopening the file. For the Garza family, the silence was devastating. But for a retired Houston homicide detective named Ana Velasquez, the silence was a challenge. A challenge she was more than prepared to confront. Because if the police wouldn't investigate what happened in 1984, she would. And what she found next stunned even veteran investigators. She uncovered something the sheriff's office never mentioned, never filed, never shared. A piece of this case so critical, so revealing, that once she saw it, she knew. Someone didn't just mishandle this investigation. Someone may have buried it. By the time the Garza family reached out to her, Ana Velasquez had already lived an entire career inside crime scenes that most detectives tried hard to forget. 20 years in Houston's homicide division, dozens of solved cases, hundreds of bodies, and a reputation for cutting through lies like bone. Ana didn't scare easily. She didn't fold. She didn't accept lost evidence as an answer. And the Garza file, it wasn't just messy. It was wrong. She started with the basics: evidence logs, chain of custody, officer statements. Within 48 hours, she noticed glaring holes. No complete chain of custody for the rifle. No record of crime scene sketches. No trace of 2 missing autopsy photos. No confirmed map of where the victim actually fell. It was almost as if the case had been assembled by someone who wanted it unsolved. So Anna did what no one else had done in 40 years. She flew to Belle Glade and walked the canal herself. The site had changed, but the land still held memories. Overgrown grass, black, slow water, mud so thick it sucked at her shoes. But as she studied the terrain, she noticed something that every official report had overlooked. There should have been drag marks here. According to the files, the victim collapsed exactly where he was found. But the soil told a different story. She called in a forensic pathologist, Dr. Elijah Rivas, to take soil samples and run metal trace tests. The results shocked them both. About 15 yards away from the documented scene, Dr. Rivas detected residual ferrous particles, the oxidization footprint of blood. Blood that had been present, then washed away by time, in a spot that did not match the official crime scene location. Meaning, the body may have lain somewhere else, meaning the crime scene may have been staged, meaning the earliest police report was already false. Anna didn't stop. She began digging into regional archives, looking for anything: police logs, old newspaper clippings, arrest sheets. That's when she found it. A forgotten local article, printed in a tiny border town paper in December 1984. McAllen police question man matching Belle Glade murder suspect. A man with no ID. Detained. Released. A man described with one detail that matched Garza's FBI file perfectly. A scar under his left eye. Why wasn't this report in the sheriff's file? Why didn't the FBI have a copy? Why was this encounter never followed up? And then came the discovery that broke the entire case open. Anna secured a mugshot, grainy, low resolution, of that same man arrested in McAllen in '84 under the name Jose Luis S. She enhanced the image. Compared it to the FBI's age regression composite, measured the scar, depth, angle, and placement. The result was nearly undeniable. It was him, or someone who looked impossibly like him. Anna compiled everything: soil analysis, geographic overlays, facial matching data, and submitted a 17-minute recorded summary to the sheriff's office and the FBI. She expected follow-up questions. She expected a reopened investigation. She expected urgency. Instead, she received one of the coldest responses a detective ever sees. Due to interagency jurisdictional parameters, this case cannot be reopened at this time. Filed, not reviewed, not escalated, shut. And then, something even more disturbing happened. A week later, the Garza family received an anonymous envelope. No return address, no postmark, no fingerprints. Inside was a photocopy of Anna's full report. Across the first page, written in red ink: "You're getting close. Stop." Not a warning, a threat. But Anna didn't scare easily. If someone wanted her off this case, it meant she had just gotten close to the truth. Because buried inside a sealed set of court documents, documents tied to a man detained the same week as the murder, was a missing witness. An informant, a name that vanished from the records. A man who might have seen everything. A man whose file had been scrubbed so thoroughly that Anna now believed the unthinkable. Someone wasn't hiding Juan Dios Garza. Someone was hiding the truth. It is now 2025. 40 years have passed since that morning in the Belle Glade sugarcane fields. 40 years since a man with 3 names walked across the dew-soaked rows and set in motion a mystery that would outlive almost everyone involved. And yet, the case remains open, not active, not investigated. Just open. A label that means everything and nothing at the same time. Juan Dios Garza is still listed on the FBI's most wanted page. The same outdated composite image, the same height, the same brown eyes, the same scar beneath the left eye. But the truth is chilling. There have been no official leads in decades. No confirmed sightings. No movement. The FBI's internal classification reads, "Cold, pending external intelligence." A bureaucratic phrase that really means, we're waiting. If someone else finds something, we'll take a look. No one is looking for him. Not actively, not meaningfully, not with urgency. But someone should. Because the more investigators dug into old files, the more they discovered that Garza's disappearance wasn't rare. It was patterned. Across Florida, Texas, and the borderlands, similar cases showed the same symptoms. Undocumented suspects vanished. Investigations were left unfinished. Files were quietly labeled suspended. Families were told we're still looking, when no one was. Garza's case wasn't an anomaly. He was the symbol of a system that didn't just fail, It's selectively abandoned. But for the people who loved him, for the families on both sides of the tragedy, there is no closure. Not for the man who died that morning, not for the brother who survived, not for the relatives still waiting for answers. Every year, on the anniversary of the shooting, a small group gathers at the canal. No news crews, no officials, just candles flickering against the water. Juan's niece, who was born years after the murder, kneels at the bank and lights a single candle. She has done this since she was a teenager. Not just for him, she whispers, but for all the ones who never came back. On the ground beside her are fading photos of other missing men. Migrant workers, forgotten fugitives, unnamed victims, each one taped to handmade poster boards, each one representing a family still waiting for justice that never comes. As the candles burn down, the same questions hang in the humid Florida air. Who helped Juan disappear? Why was the evidence buried? And how can a federal fugitive stay invisible for 4 decades? Someone knows more. A witness, an officer, a clerk who filed something away, a border agent who saw a familiar scar, a person who made one decision 40 years ago and stayed silent ever since. And until that silence breaks, the case will stay exactly where it has always been. Not solved. Not forgotten. Just suspended between 2 worlds, like the man himself. A ghost in the sugarcane. There's one thing this case has made painfully clear. When justice depends on memory, it fades. When it depends on paperwork, it gets lost. But when it depends on people, on all of us, it has a chance to survive. Juan Dios Garza may still be alive. He may be living under another name in another country. Or he may lie buried in an unmarked grave, known only to the person who put him there. And somewhere out there, someone holds the answer. A detail they overlooked. A face they recognized. A conversation they overheard. A document they filed and never questioned. One truth. One fact. One moment. That's all it takes to break a 40-year silence. If you know anything, even something small, contact the FBI or Crime Stoppers. You can remain anonymous, and you might be the one who finally gives this family the closure they've been denied for 4 decades. If this story moved you, if you believe cases like this shouldn't disappear into the dark, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, hit the bell, like this video, and share it with someone who cares about justice. Because this isn't just content. It's a case that still needs answers. And maybe those answers start with you.